Expose how Justice Sola Qnd Dupe Oguntade'S 17 years marriage crashed. So, where is the perfect marriage? Since 2003, erudite jurist, High Chief Justice Adesola Oguntade and his beautiful wife, Dupe have been a pair to behold. They have caught a picture of that adorable, perfect couple made for each other. Justice Oguntade, retired, was 63 when he married Dupe. The former Justice of the Supreme Court was then already married with children. Dupe, who then was in her early 40s, had left her former marriage that produced 3 sons. Their union quickly spiraled into something like a marriage made in heaven. The Oguntade'S looked like your dream couple, always smiling and looking happy, but away from the poking eyes of the public, they were treading on a garden filled with thorns. For 17 years, they were rolling on a ticking time bomb. The last time the Oguntade had another great showing was back in March this year when they gathered high and mighty together in London for the celebration of the 80th birthday, which would arguably be the party of the year. But the party appeared to be more of a send-forth for the erudite man of law as he thereafter lost his bid to get another term as Nigeria's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, the post he got in 2017. It also marked the beginning of a hot battle that later ended in the couple going separate ways. Today, Dupe has moved to a new apartment in Lagos after her retired justice hubby gave her the marching orders. The development has since exposed the long family wars that have been going on within the Oguntade household, particularly the one between the children from Justice Oguntade'S first wife and their stepmom, Dupe. Justice Oguntade and his second wife did not have a child together. So, a crisis that erupted immediately after the London party, later escalated, after they returned to Nigeria, into what has brought that flamboyant and adorable marriage of 17 years to a halt. In the wake of the shocking story of the marital crisis between octogenarian retired jurist, Justice Sola Oguntade and his wife, Dupe, the Boss newspaper did an extensive exposé on everything that went wrong, dated back to the very beginning. We produced it below. After many months of family squabbles, backbiting and mutual distrust, the 17-year-old marriage of Nigeria's immediate past High Commissioner to the United Kingdom and retired Supreme Court Justice, H.E. Judge Adesola Oguntade and wife, Chief, Mrs. Dupe Oguntade, has hit the rocks. Things have fallen apart and the center can no longer hold for the celebrated couple as Madam was sent packing from their Lekki, Lagos home on Thursday, October 15, 2020. Her exit that day occurred after a serious altercation which led to her stuffing her belongings and valuables into many suitcases, hauling them into a waiting pickup van and driving out of the premises. The marriage had faced challenges from the outset, and chief among the problems was the stiff opposition mounted by Oguntade'S children, whose names according to Wikipedia are Aboshede SNR, Abimbola, Folu, San, Deola, Daniel, Yetunde Aboshede JNI and Jide. For some inexplicable reasons, the children made their opposition to their father's choice for second wife very obvious. They were far from accommodating, and it was no surprise that Mrs. Oguntade too kept them at arm's length. Then began the battle for Justice Oguntade'S heart and attention. Unknown to the children, Justice Oguntade had known Mrs. Oguntade, who was previously married to Dr. Jimmy Okunola Aina, for whom she bore all her 3 children, Jimmy, Ayodele and Folusho, from way back. We gathered that the duo actually met in 1961 through her uncle, Alhaji Nuruddin Shitabe, the 7th Seriki Musulumi of Lagos. Dupe, who was a toddler then, had come to see her uncle off to England at Apapa Wharf, Lagos. Oguntade was also there to celebrate with his friend. Therefore, when Justice Oguntade and Dupe reunited, it was a case of deep respect, devotion and love. She was so respectful that she calls him Baba, father, due to the age difference between them. In no time, the duo became one of the most celebrated couples on the Lagos social scene on account of the status of Justice Oguntade as well as the powerful fashion statement that was always made by his wife, who had a good sense of style. Over time, Mrs. Oguntade seemed to have settled into her role, and along the line too, she was able to win over one of her stepdaughters, a move that caused rancor between the children. Despite the issues, multiple sources revealed to the boss that Mrs. Oguntade doted on the husband, and showered tender, loving care on him all the time, and that was why, despite his children's seeming aunts, he stood firmly by her. The boss gathered that at the Oguntade home, Mrs. Oguntade's word was law. She held court without any resistance. She was so fully in charge that when the stepchildren visit, they would be welcomed downstairs. They did not have the temerity to venture to the upper chambers of the house. In 2017, Justice Oguntade got the juicy appointment of Nigeria's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom and was obviously joyous, but members of his family were reading the situation differently. For his wife, moving to London was an opportunity to take complete charge of her man and flourish, away from her pesky stepchildren. The children, on the other hand, were in a state of panic. They felt this would further alienate them. They allegedly began to spread words to family members and friends that they needed better access to their father because Mrs. Oguntade had not been doing a good job of caring for him. They even said she was bullying the old man. Meanwhile, his arrival in London was big news. His historic visit to meet Her Majesty the Queen at Buckingham Palace was well captured for posterity by Ovation International magazine. It was a day of sheer grandeur. The resumption of His Excellency Justice G. Oguntade as the Nigeria High Commissioner to United Kingdom in 2017 was made more prominent all over the world when he visited the Queen with his wife, Her Excellency, Mrs. Dupe Oguntade, wearing the Nigerian national dress in color sync with the Queen's dress. That is the kind of aura Mr. Dupe Oguntade carries with her. From all indications, she was having a superb time at the High Commission. That was until some unsavory stories began to hit the social media. The stories gave a very contrary picture to the one painted above. They accused Mrs. Oguntade of extortion, high-handedness and worst of all, infidelity. She was described as debauched and decadent. Of course, she was very disturbed by these stories. Her only feeling was that it was the handiwork of her enemies back home in Nigeria. The stories still did not abate as preparations began for the March 10, 2020, 80th birthday celebration of her husband. An 80th birthday ordinarily should be an occasion to celebrate, rejoice and unite as a family, but this event seemed to have ignited the bile within the Oguntade family, and that was when the cookie crumbled. As the matron of the house, Mrs. Oguntade was in charge of all arrangements. Of course, the family felt shut out because they had virtually no major role to play, but were left with no choice than to fall in line just to ensure that the patriarch was happy. The event itself was filled with splendor, color and glamour, and as expected was attended by Nigeria's rich and famous. Held at the Hilton, Park Lane, it was the height of elegance and exclusivity. The Oguntade family and their 350 special guests had a great time. All members of the family were in attendance. The Holy Communion service was officiated by the Most Reverend Josiah Idowu Ferran, while music was provided by evangelist Ebenezer Obey. Held in the middle of the coronavirus outbreak, some rumpus emanated from the high-caliber ceremony as the rumor mill was agog with the news that some guests had contracted the virus and that in fact 2 people died. This was later debunked by Chief Olusegun Oshoba and Ovation publisher, Basharun Dele Momodu, who both attended the birthday party. It was later discovered that only one guest died days after attending the birthday, and his death was due to other health complications that had nothing to do with COVID-19. While the coronavirus story was making waves in the social media, bigger problems had engulfed the house of Oguntade. First, the stepdaughter, who was in the corner of Mrs. Oguntade, reportedly broke ranks with her over a phone conversation that she overheard. That was not all. There was an incident of a missing suitcase. We gathered that the suitcase where all the gifts and cash presented to the celebrants was disappeared from the Hilton. A few phone calls later, it was discovered that one of Mrs. Oguntade'S guests, who had been given a ride on the private jet of Premier Lotto chairman and Odol of Ife, Sir Qnd Dupe, had checked in the said luggage. An enraged Justice Oguntade reportedly told Sir Qnd to kindly take the suitcase for safekeeping and later allegedly tongue-thrashed the wife. Our sources revealed that the couple had such a bitter quarrel that week that they were not only on speaking terms, but Justice Oguntade had gone ahead to give his wife the marching orders. This marked the beginning of the end, as things seemed to snowball afterwards. The news from London was cheering for the Oguntade children, who had all along been only tolerating their stepmother. Now joined by their sibling who had hitherto broken ranks, they decided, in their words, to rescue their father. They reportedly accused Mrs. Oguntade of systematically drugging their father with psychotic drugs, especially trazodone, and manipulating him to favor her and her children. They also accused her of selling cars that had been presented to him as gifts without his knowledge, as well as even starving him of food. In London, though, the situation had somehow become better and Justice Oguntade and wife had mended fences. In fact, she had almost convinced her husband to stay put in London and not return to Nigeria again, but he insisted that he had to return home. Of course, the children were also putting pressure. That was how they both flew on British Airways to Nigeria last month. A mild drama ensued in the Oguntade Lekki home as the couple were flying into town. Jimmy Aino, eldest son of Mrs. Oguntade, had got wind that the stepchildren were plotting to lock his mother out of her home and arranged security protection in form of some soldiers. The fully armed men were dispatched to Lekki. Not to be outdone, the children reached out to top persons in the security too, and they were able to get police officers of their own to also stand guard. The situation could have degenerated into a show of force and even worse if not for the intervention of Lagos Commissioner of Police, Mr. Hakeem Odumosu. It was who was able to speak with Jimmy, urged the soldiers to stand down, and some form of normalcy eventually returned. Some policemen were then stationed on the street near the residence to keep the peace. That was not all. News also filtered through that the children were going to storm the airport to stop Mrs. Oguntade from even entering her husband's car, but they were told that such an action will be embarrassing to their father, so they jettisoned the idea. Our sources revealed that just to calm frayed nerves, it was a close-up friend of Mrs. Dupe Oguntade, Chief Mrs. Shade Okoya, and her husband, Are of Lagos, Chief Rasak Okoya, who arranged airport security and vehicles to ferry the Oguntade's home. But the battle line had been drawn. So it was no surprise that a few days after their arrival, Mrs. Oguntade and her stepdaughter, Deola, who is married to Mr. Bolaji Ayorinde, San, had an altercation. We gathered that Mrs. Oguntade was angry that the Oguntade children, led by Mrs. Deola Ayorinde, had sent the cooks away without her knowledge. They were only brought back that day. The hot exchanges of the two women attracted Justice Oguntade. The wife complained that the daughter had hitherto called her a thief who stole plates and a piano from London, and now had the temerity to order her cooks around. I am tired. This is too much. This is my house. The atmosphere is too toxic and I would not take it anymore, Mrs. Oguntade reportedly yelled. She also noted that the problem in the family had caused her to develop high blood pressure. Her husband explained that he, in fact, sent the cooks away because they looked more like bouncers than cooks, but she would have none of it because, according to her, for years, she had been in charge of her kitchen and domestic affairs, and it was impossible for him to suddenly change overnight. It was a very heated encounter in the presence of Qnd Oguntade'S last son. In fact, Mrs. Oguntade accused the stepdaughter of being the brain behind the negative social media stories written about her earlier in the year, and while also speaking, referred to Qnd as her son. But Mrs. Ayorinde interjected. She countered that Qnd was not, because Mrs. Oguntade had never treated him as one. She reportedly said, "Don't call him your son, all your 3 sons have at least one house each where is Qnd's own." He also accused her and her sons of orchestrating Qnd's ouster from his job. Also, Mrs. Oguntade told her stepdaughter not to come to her house to give any orders. The stepdaughter fired back that she was in her father's house and had her rights, while also accusing her stepmother of raising her voice against the dad. The back and forth went on for a few minutes, and Justice Oguntade, who was there all along, was so embarrassed that he left the scene. On the night of October 14, some prominent Nigerians, including Chief Okoya, were at the residence allegedly to appeal to Justice Oguntade. We even heard that in the course of the discussion, Mrs. Oguntade was accused of infidelity. She vehemently declared that she was innocent and wrongly accused. She reportedly swore by the Bible and Quran. Another argument erupted on Thursday, leading to a shouting match between Justice Oguntade and wife. This one was so bad that the domestic staff had to call the children. We were told that at this stage Justice Oguntade had called his wife's family members, including her mother, informing them that he had had enough from his wife. When the children arrived, they realized that their father had not been fed and also raised alarm at his shabby treatment by their stepmother. It was in the presence of the children that the respected jurist said that he was no longer interested and that it was all over. He then ordered the wife out of their home. We were told that Mrs. Oguntade was adamant that she was not leaving. She said she was not going to step an inch out of the house, and almost engaged him in a fight, accusing him of taking the action because of his dalliances. She reportedly told him that she was not going anywhere because she had nowhere to go. The respected justice reportedly replied that he had built 3 houses for her 3 sons in Lekki and also built a house for her mother, Mrs. Alexandria Motolani Adufe Hastrop, whom we learned she has a strained relationship with recently, that she was free to move to any of them. When it was obvious that Justice Oguntade was serious about his order for her to leave, Mrs. Oguntade, aided by the domestic staff, packed over 100 suitcases filled with clothes, watches and jewelry and left. She allegedly also cleared out his suits, belts and other personal effects. For now, the children seem to have won the battle of taking control of Justice Oguntade'S life and properties. With their new leverage, the children had taken immediate action. We heard that they have already taken possession of a land allegedly owned by Justice Oguntade that was being developed by Mrs. Oguntade'S sons. And to ensure he was not lonely, they and some close family members now take turns to be by his side. Though we do not know where Mrs. Modupe Oguntade, who does not have any child for the husband, is living at the moment, sources revealed that close family friends like Chief Rasak Akoni Okoya and Oba of Lagos have waded into the matter with a view of settling the brouhaha and bringing the erstwhile lovebirds back together.